Chapter 208 Joyous Meeting. Han Li felt that he was having an incredibly marvelous, erotic dream. The person with him in the dream had a burning passion, but he could never clearly see the face of the peerless beauty. But even if the erotic dream were better, there would always be a time when he would wake up. After an unknown amount of time had passed, Han Li finally awoke from his glamorous dream. But as soon as he opened his eyes, what he saw was a gorgeous, peerless face and a pair of snow-like cold pupils. This beautiful face was both unfamiliar yet familiar at the same time, causing Han Li's heart to thump once. "You woke up," the young woman said indifferently with a voice no trace of emotion. This caused a slight chill to rise from Han Li's back when he heard it. Speaking of a chill, Han Li discovered that his entire naked body was tightly embracing a similarly naked beautiful woman. The woman's face was first crimson, but immediately her sleek eyebrows rose vertically, and her jade-like face frosted over. She coldly spat out, "Have you had enough? Take your dog paws off me and let me go." Started, Han Li instinctively retrieved both of his hands and released the woman. This great beauty, seeing that Han Li had let go, hurriedly used one hand to push herself off the ground. Her eye-catching, curved body immediately stood up from Han Li's chest. But just as the extremely beautiful young woman's slender waist had straightened, she yelled out, her flowery face losing its color with pain. Her body shook once, and then she fell again into Han Li's chest, causing Han Li to again experience the feeling of soft jade covering his torso. Han Li did not consider himself to be a base person, but he definitely did not consider himself to be a person with noble character. So when this beautiful woman had thrown herself into his arms, he regained his focus and immediately rode his hands up, pressing the woman up against his body. He gently kissed the woman's tender, alluring lips, causing the words that the woman had wanted to berate Han Li with to be forcibly shocked away. Underneath Han Li's hot kisses, her slender eyebrows slowly smoothed out, and she began to fall into a trance. What followed was a case of when conditions are right, success will naturally follow. Han Li and the young woman wordlessly enjoyed the taste of ecstasy between a man and a woman once again. This, compared to the experience they had when the two of them were in a state of semi-consciousness, caused them to become even more intoxicated and made them even more crazy and forgetful. Today, the beautiful woman's two eyes were tightly pressed up against Han Li's chest, her two cheeks flushed red, her chest rising and falling indefinitely. Evidently, she had yet to awaken from the greatest stimulus. Han Li embraced this beautiful woman with one hand, and the other hand was incessantly fondling the woman's round and well-developed area with a desire to continue. After an unknown amount of time, the gorgeous woman's breathing finally stabilized, and her expression had finally returned to normal. She slowly opened her eyes. This time she didn't say a single sentence to Han Li, immediately pushing aside Han Li's mischief-causing hand from her body. She stood up with a bleak expression and walked towards a nearby storage pouch. Han Li was slightly startled, but after a moment of hesitation, he did not obstruct this woman. The young woman retrieved a set of snow-white garments from the storage pouch and gently put them on. Not too long afterwards, she finished getting dressed, causing her entire temperament to change in an instant. She began to appear graceful and poised. At this time, she turned her head around to glance at Han Li, then stared blankly for a moment. This was because Han Li had long since stood, neatly clothed, not too far behind her. He was currently gazing at her with an admiring and tender gaze, causing this woman's state of mind to stir. A trace of a strange feeling crept into her heart. You should be very clear about what kind of person I am. The things that happened between us were only mistakes. Just pretend it was all a dream. The young woman said faintly, gently curling her sleek hair. I know. Han Li answered peacefully after a moment of silence, rubbing his nose. If a third person finds out what happened today, I will kill you. The young woman suddenly stated in a cold tone. I will not breathe a word. If this matter travels to the outside world, you can just kill me. Han Li warmly responded with a faint smile. Humph. As long as you know. Seeing that Han Li agreed instantly, The woman did not actually feel happy in her heart. In fact, she began to feel somewhat vexed, and her tone became even more vile. After saying this, the woman and Han Li remained silent in a stalemate for some time. Neither of them uttered another sentence. Although the woman was a core formation cultivator, she had always spent her time cultivating as a child. As for the affairs between males and females, she was not much different from normal young women. Thus, although she had instinctively forced Han Li to not transmit this matter to the outside world, her thoughts were still in turmoil, unsure of how to face this matter. Han Li was not much better than the woman. He had never expected that his first intimate relationship with a woman would actually be with a female core formation cultivator. In addition, it was with this kind of a peerless talent and beautiful person, completely different from the sweet-tempered, pretty daughter from a humble family that he had imagined. This caused him to laugh bitterly. Would this one-night affair be a blessing or a curse to him? But regardless of what it would be, Han Li had already seen that the woman did not harbor the malevolent idea of killing him to silence him, causing him to let out a sigh of relief. Many favorable impressions spawned towards this great beauty with whom he had already experienced the affairs of a husband and wife. But these were only favorable impressions. If the other person still wanted to become hostile and make a move, Han Li decided that he would not resign himself to death. What exactly was that sphere? How could it cause you and me too? Han Li was the first to open his mouth, but after saying half of the sentence, he did not continue. However, he trusted that the other person would be able to understand his meaning. That was the inky flood dragon's prostate capsule. I didn't expect that this beast actually was a very rarely seen male flood dragon, and I actually carelessly forgot this matter. This capsule contains an aphrodisiacal fog. When it contacts any female, it will immediately erupt. So it was like that. Hearing this, Han Li was finally enlightened. The riddle in his heart was finally resolved. Then your current appearance, why is it different from before? I practice a sect-unique cultivation technique, the female essence incarnation technique. This magic technique, although somewhat strange, can allow a person to remain perpetually young. Every 10 years, this magic technique will cycle through once. My magic strength would have gone through the cycle, and I thus naturally would have restored my young appearance. But after what happened between us, this technique was temporarily broken and I slightly aged. The young woman explained casually after a moment of silence. Then you won't have any troubles, right? Han Li didn't know why he couldn't help but ask this question. It's not a problem. My magic technique is already at great success stage. Even if my virginity has been broken, I will only lose 5 to 6 years of magic power. This to me does not count for much, said the woman coldly, glancing at Han Li with a complicated expression. Hearing this, Han Li became silent. He knew that the other person's heart still contained a significant amount of resentment towards losing her virginity. He could only remain silent and face it. This woman truly felt that she had been extremely wronged. She had just then secretly sized up the other person a few times and had confirmed once again that this Yellow Maple Valley disciple was truly completely average, whether in terms of appearance or natural talent. And she had actually done things that should only be done between a husband and wife with this person. How could this not cause her, who had always been proud and arrogant, to feel incredibly dejected? But she was also somewhat reluctant of the idea of killing this person to relieve the hatred in her heart. After all, the other person was the male who had taken away her virginity, and she inevitably had a few strange feelings towards this person. This caused her to feel both anger and hatred. What time is it now? It shouldn't have passed the time limit of 5 days, right? Han Li couldn't help but ask after suddenly recalling something. Upon hearing this, the woman, whose state of mind was already unstable, felt an abrupt fright spring up in her heart, but immediately afterwards, she calmed down and said calmly, it shouldn't have been that long. The sedative contained in the inky flood dragon's aphrodisiacal smoke should be very low in concentration. At most, we were unconscious for 5 to 6 hours. But if we want to leave, we also must make our preparations now. This dangerous area is not so easy to exit from, added the woman, knitting her eyebrows. "However, before all of that, you have no opinions on me taking this treasure chest, right?" inquired the young woman as she glanced coldly at Han Li, her almond lips opening slightly. Hearing this, Han Li bitterly laughed. Although at the moment he could not sense the depth of that woman's magic power, it was definitely above the Foundation establishment stage. How could he dare to fight with her over the treasure chest? The woman, seeing that Han Li did not utter a word, coldly smiled and leaped towards the white jade pavilion. In the end, she very smoothly retrieved the golden chest into her storage pouch, then flew back to Han Li's side. Those spiritual medicines. Seeing that the woman had not harvested those spiritual medicines, Han Li stammered, somewhat baffled. "I have no need of them. If you like them, you can harvest them all." The woman glanced at Han Li and said without geniality after hearing this. Hearing these words, Han Li became very happy in his heart. He had just been worrying that, after exiting the forbidden area, he would not have enough spiritual medicines to turn into his sect and would seem suspicious to others. Thus, he unhesitatingly immediately flew over, and in the time it took to roll one's eyes he retrieved tens of spiritual medicines. The woman stood in the same spot and coldly watched Han Li's movements without making a sound. Only after Han Li harvested the medicines and returned, did she slowly and solemnly say, "To break free from this place requires cooperation between the two of us. We cannot successfully leave this place if one of us is missing."